Hello and welcome to Leave the Feed 30 Days of Disconnect. Today is day 5. Say it, mean it. And today is all about autosuggestion, reprogramming our mind, and no better person to talk about than educator, author, and clinical hypnotist Shauna Cummins. Shauna, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So, how does one become a hypnotist? What inspired you? Like, what sparked this journey? How did this unfold?
Well, it's a very classic kind of like healer practitioner origin story, which is I was in need of help myself, and I was seeking lots of different healing modalities at the time. I was very burnt out from a career in fashion and publishing, and thinking about going back to get my master's in social work. And I found hypnosis as a client, kind of desperate need of healing at the time. And it helped me very immediately and profoundly in a way where my life was like before hypnosis, after hypnosis. And I ended up training with that practitioner who I went to go see. And then I ended up getting a mentorship with a hypnotist in New York. And I trained under her for a year and a half. And it just became my whole life very quickly. Like, I was like, oh my God, all the roads were leading to this. I didn't really know this existed, but this is exactly what I'm supposed to do with my life. It really was one of those things. So it was just very healing, and especially for my sense of self-worth and my purpose when I found hypnosis. And so much so that I was like, I want to study this. I want to, learn all about it. And I quickly, went in the direction of professionally becoming a hypnotist. It made that much of an impact on me. But I understand the misconception of it because it's so pervasive in Hollywood and, stories about like losing control or clucking like a chicken. And I think when I first, went to a hypnotist, I still had those misconceptions as well on some level. So I'm always like very passionate about dispelling those myths and, making it much more accessible and kind of like an everyday, powerful tool that you can use. But yeah, so for me, it was really just discovery of like self-healing and getting me out of a bad spot that I was in my life. Yeah.
Then, like, what type of education does a hypnotist go through, and how is that? I imagine education's ongoing, and then working with clients. Like, how does that journey unfold?
Well, up until, the present moment, it's still unlicensed and unregulated in terms of like state licensure. So it's sort of a specialty, like a specialization that you do with extended mentorship and certification and trainings. And so a lot of, licensed therapists will do a training specializing in hypnosis and have that be part of their, repertoire. And then there will be people who do it as like lay hypnotists who do certifications and work with it, either professionally but not therapeutically, or, this sort of thing. And so for me, it was kind of like an in between. I have a background in social work in my undergraduate education. And I had explored that, professionally, but decided it wasn't for me. And then I went into like kind of, the arts and fashion and publishing. And then going back to social work school, getting a master's, deciding actually I wanted to pursue hypnosis, full time, I decided to do a training with a really renowned hypnotist here in New York, Melissa Tiers, who specializes in working with the kind of modern neuroscience of hypnosis, like understanding how your brain works, how to work with it like a muscle, how to change your thought patterns and beliefs, and also, referencing the more mystical side of hypnosis, but really making it very practical, foundational practice. And then after I did her training, I was very lucky to get a mentorship with another hypnotist in New York, where I trained for a year and a half under her and eventually doing supervision. So it was very much like old school mentorship style, trainings. And then I will do a training, every year or so in something directly related to hypnosis, neurolinguistic programming, neuroscience, or sound healing or meditation. And down the line, I created my own curriculum and my own school of hypnosis where I, kind of offer it as a training and a year-long mentorship as well. So it's kind of like at the intersection of like licensed, unlicensed therapies where it allows people, to work as a healing arts practitioner, outside of the regular confines of licensed therapy, but then at the same time, it allows licensed therapists to have a little bit more of creative, sometimes spiritual approach to their work. So I have a lot of like thoughts about the licensed unlicensed intersection of the field, but I still feel like at this moment I feel good that where it's at because it's a little bit complicated, but yeah, so that was my journey.
Changing patterns and belief systems are so difficult for so many of us. We have traumas that we go through, we have habits that we can't break. And what are some of the themes or some of the reoccurring problems that people come to you with? What are they seeking when they seek, your counsel, your advice, your practice?
I mean, it really is like everything and anything, but it could the people traditionally think of hypnosis for, to stop smoking, to overcome insomnia, to change these habits sort of specifically, or maybe like overeating or, things like that. But you can also really work with hypnosis in a general way as well. And even when you're working with it very specifically, like to stop an addiction or something. The stop smoking hypnosis has really now become much more like, I think, content and social media addiction. And in some of my hypnosis trainings, they have referenced like, oh, the smoking of our generation is now going to be like social media addiction for these new generations, and like how to, because it's so ubiquitous, and how to like separate yourself from that. So it'll be interesting to talk to you about that. But it's always important to go to a foundational core belief system that you're changing when you're, even if you're changing something specific. So it's like you change your relationship with how you speak to yourself, you change your relationship with yourself, and then you change your relationship with the thing that you're managing. So yeah, so people come to me for general and specific changes that they want to make. Um, yeah.
It's interesting that you brought up the analogy between smoking and social media addiction because we've talked about it in other episodes in this show that it is this generation's smoking just
Mm.
because it's analogous as a habitual routine. But, it's a pleasurable experience, not just the act of smoking, but the social connections that used to come from it when people did smoke and they
Mm.
have those conversations outside. And I think with social media, it's a little bit more complex because cigarettes, you reach a point in time in history where people know this is very unhealthy, not just for you, but for everyone
Mm-hmm.
around you. And it's easier to say, I need to address this because it's hurting myself and the people I love, right? And possibly strangers I walk by down the street, where social media is inherently a part of life now. It's really become embedded in the fabric of everything that we do, from how we shop to where we get advice. You're on social media, creators are on social media, and they're platforms for us to share really powerful messages. But at the same time, they can suck us down really dark holes. And those dark holes can come from being a creator who can't stop chasing an identity through the amount of followers they have, or it could be the person that's like incessantly scrolling and is just like, I need to know what's going on. I need to know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience, like working with social media addiction, like what have you seen as some of like the challenges, the aha moments, and the to be determineds as this journey of helping people find peace in this reality unfolds?
I mean, it is really tough because it's like a lot of people will have their businesses, reliant on social media as well. So like it's like they recognize that it's interfering with their mental health and their well-being, and they're on it too much, too mindlessly, and maybe even affecting their sleep. But at the same time, they need to be on it. So how do they do it? So in that way, it's a little similar to food, like food addiction, because it's like you need it, but at the same time, like how do you work with it? So having boundaries is really important on a couple of different levels. Like we work with this sort of framework of the neurological levels of change. It's sort of like a diagram that like designates the different levels that you have to be conscious of change. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not. It follows the model of the language of learning by Gregory Bateson. And so the neurological levels of change is the bottom one, like the most important one, is the environment. The second one is your behavior. The third one is your skills and capabilities. The fourth one is your beliefs. Fifth one is your identity. And then the sixth top of the tier, like it's like a triangle, is your source energy. So there's top down and there's bottom up change. And with something like social media, you have to do both. For example, the influencers, or if it's part of your identity, like you're sourcing, validation and reward, dopamine hooks from social media, that's going to be something that you're going to be unpacking your beliefs, your identity around that. So you're going to have to really have things in place where you can have positive affirmations and awareness of when those triggers come up and start to resource your identity outside of social media, and start to really find evidence in your everyday life outside of social media for your worth and for your worthiness, and feel agency in that. And then in your environment, you have to really set yourself up for success in your environment and your habits. Like put it in a box, put it outside of your bedroom. Like those basic things make huge differences, because otherwise it's just like always there, So you really have to work at it from the top down and the bottom up, because it's like just in everything, everywhere, So yeah, it has a lot of strategy involved. But,
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. And, even with that identity, it might be a little different for me because I've always had an identity outside of social media. For me, it's difficult to have an identity inside social media because I have a natural resistance to it. But someone that grew up and their parents were filming them, posting content about them from the time they were a child, they have a tablet in hand, a phone in hand at age 5, 6, whatever it is.
mm-hmm.
It's hard to relinquish that connection. And as you're working with people that struggle with addictions, social media or other, how does autosuggestion and like how does that really play a role of setting affirmations and creating affirmations and having the right positive self-talk about yourself? How is that foundational to making sure that you're prepared for and being an active participant and not quitting social media, but finding that balance?
I mean, I think it's fundamental to bring yourself back to the basics of like your relationship with your self-awareness, your self-concept, outside of this moment and this kind of like attachment and addiction to the device, to the media, and just bring yourself back to, what do you want? Why is this not working for you? What's your plan for how to move through it? And bring yourself to a place of awareness where you can start to get a sense of when the social media is triggering you, what it's taking away from you, how to interrupt that, and then interrupt it with self-collaborating affirmations that are going to reinforce positive, resourceful beliefs about yourself, So for example, like I have, I am, in control. I have, everything that I need here without my phone. Like, I have, agency and imagination. Like I can, set my goal for myself and follow through. I believe in myself, all of these things, depending on what it is exactly that what beliefs you're really wanting to reinforce. It just really helps to direct your attention and align it with your intention. And your mind, it's like the old saying, it's a wonderful tool, but a terrible master. It will follow your instruction when you do it, especially with repetition and reinforcement. And that inversely is how social media works so well because it's reinforcing all of these things, into your senses, into your subconscious mind, into your emotional mind. It's making you cry. It's making you angry. It's making you lust. All of these things are like going into your emotional mind and influencing you. So you doing the opposite, you don't have to do too much. You just have to do it consistently by setting yourself up for success with these positive beliefs and affirmations, in addition to putting some boundaries around it, because it is kind of like in your face all the time. So you have to kind of take some control over that and interrupt the pattern and reinforce your agency and the beliefs that you want to cultivate and influence yourself. It's like becoming your own influencer, because social media is, just like advertising, it's following our ability to go into trance, which is very natural, which is a sort of self-hypnosis, and it's using that against us to profit from us, to influence us. And so it's a natural ability that our brain has. It's the way, that we can do for ourselves. But unfortunately, it's so unconscious and ubiquitous that, social media and the advertising is doing it it's so unconscious for us, and it's just like everywhere, that once you start to identify that, in small everyday ways, when you start to reclaim your attention and start to influence yourself with your affirmations and your intentions for what you want for yourself, you will see that how you have agency there, and how you can, make improvements in it and start to reclaim your attention and work with it, because it's it's a very precious commodity. That's why all of these big corporations, are taking it away from us and like siphoning it from us. But it's really the way our brain works, and so it's about learning how to make it work for us. And I know it's hard to be like, it feels like it has to be like all or nothing thing. Like I'm just going to go live in the woods, without social media or the internet, but it doesn't have to be like that. I feel like you can set healthy boundaries around it, and we can learn how to, live with it. And most importantly, really cultivate clear spaces where you can connect with yourself in a more reverent, sacred way, outside of all the influence of social media, and really influence yourself. And affirmations and self-hypnosis is a really powerful way to do that, So your brain does follow your instruction when you do it on a regular basis.
Yeah, I love what you said about being your own influencer, right? And, your brain will follow your instructions. The observer creates the reality, and where are you directing your consciousness to? And I feel like for a lot of people that might have grown up connected to the digital world, it might be a little bit frightening at first to be in this existence. And, we all have a level of self-awareness, but most of our actions are unconscious. So to harness that strength and that power, doesn't come from waking up every morning and putting your phone to the side and saying, I have what I need within me. It takes a depth of desire to create that change. And, what advice do you have for people that are struggling as a creator, or maybe just a doom scroller, or they're just trapped in the feed for hours a day, and they really need to connect back to themselves, to be their own influencer? What can they expect at the beginning of the journey so they don't get frightened by their own experience or turned off or scared from what they're experiencing?
I think, starting small and consistent would be the best way, just to build up, the resources and the strength to do it, like, for example, taking it out of your bedroom when you sleep, like working with that. And when you do that, maybe having a practice where you go inside and think about what you can thank yourself for. Like think about your day and review it in your mind, like a memory training exercise without the help of anything else. Very small, everyday ways, doing that for a week, doing that for 30 days, doing along with the book. That would be really impactful and go a long way, because your brain is going to look for the things that you're directing your attention towards, the questions that you ask yourself in that space outside of technology. Your brain is going to try to look and source for, answers and, situations that match that. And then you can really embed that into your mind by deeming it important, just breathing it into your body, just taking it in. And your brain is like, oh, that is important. That's what you're thinking about. That's what you're feeling. We're going to remember that. And, the brain has a negativity bias. It's part of our survival, like our fight, flight, freeze, fawn mechanism system. And that social media is hooked into that, just like the slot machines in Las Vegas are hooked into that. It's hooked into a reward deprivation comparison, program in your brain, which is part of the survival brain or the amygdala, where things are just black and white, this or that. They're very binary. So it's, one bad thing happens, you're going to think about it without being conscious. You're going to be like, gosh, why did that happen? And then you're going to have bad feelings about it. But if you have a conscious practice of, outside of your phone, outside of social media, bring your attention to what you love about yourself and your life, what you're thankful for, your brain is going to go there consciously and deem it important. It doesn't do it really on its own. It doesn't track positivity and progress on its own. But once you start to do it as a practice, then it's really cool, because you do find what you're looking for. There's another part of the brain, it's called the reticular activating system, and it is responsible for the confirmation bias, like finding what you're thinking about. If you're obsessed about something, you see it everywhere, And so if you're thinking like, oh, I'm thankful for this. I'm thankful that I did this for myself. I feel good about this. I want to do more of that. You're going to start to consciously collaborate with your life and create it. Whereas if you're just, and we, a lot of us are mindlessly surfing, the internet and social media, then everybody else's influences are coming in there, and they're going through our survival network. So we're getting cortisol, the stress hormone spikes. We're getting adrenaline strikes. We're getting, oxytocin, like love, hormone. And then also we're being influenced by what we're looking for, what we're thinking about, by other people's, desires. So it's just a really good practice for everybody right now to reclaim their imagination and tune into their own desires outside of, like, social media feed.
Yeah, I love that, building off of the be your own influencer, this idea of conscious collaboration with yourself, being able to be the one that's the director, not the one that is having their strings pulled by streams of content. And I think when you become a conscious collaborator with yourself and you are able to direct yourself, over time it becomes easier to disconnect, because you're not fueled by that. Your motivations and your needs and your desires are more inward than outward. And what's it been like for you in the process? Because, you live in this world and you're an author and you have a business and you're on social media. So, like, how has it been for you adjusting to digital realities, and how do you find peace in these environments and consciously collaborate with yourself?
Well, it ebbs and flows, into to be totally transparent. But I have to say, I am really excited about the new year, and I really want to do your book into the new year, the 2026, like, Leave the Feed 30-day challenge. And I am really looking forward to building on some habits that I have just started, healthy, like, media training habits. I feel like the last year or two, because I've been going through lots of adjustments in my life, a default mode of, like, checking out, like my nervous system survival mode of, like, escaping. Like, I don't really have many other places to escape to anymore in my life. And so I see that it's perfectly suited for social media escapism. It's just a freeze response. and it just like feeds it to like a really detrimental place. So I don't feel like I feel like it's gotten to a bad place in the last year or so, and I'm recognizing it more and more. And my partner moved in this last year, and I, my habits changed, So anyway, the last like 4 or 5 months, I just moved the phone back out of my room at night, which has been huge. And I have like a time limit thing which has been helpful. But I am going to like increase it with like getting a box for it, putting it in the box, and really timing myself for the time that I just scroll, like mindlessly scroll, like as if I'm watching a movie or something like that. Like I want to increase like the challenges for myself with that. But I see that it really is like a coping survival thing. I see that very clearly in this last year. It hadn't been that bad in my life previously, but I see how it kind of got to a bad place, but very related to stress, very related to coping mechanisms, and just like perfectly suited for that, And I have my practices of meditation, self-hypnosis that I do every day that I find very nourishing and helpful to work with my imagination and to feed it in a positive kind of sovereign way. But yeah, I see that social media it's like I've been eating fast food like for a year, and I feel like shit. Like that's how I feel. That's how I feel like it's been doing to my brain. I feel like it's been rotting it, like it's because it's just comparison. It's just like a lot of like fear and divisiveness, like in my practice, I also bring people together. My partner and I have a space here in Brooklyn where we bring people together for ceremonies and experiences and, kind of community healing and therapy. And I'm really like so passionate about that right now, because to bring people together, who have different belief systems and backgrounds, and to be in a space where we could really feel our shared humanity and, wish well for each other, and connect. I feel like that's really old school, but really radical right now and really important, and that's what I want to do more of, because I feel like the social media thing really, there's a lot of good things that come from it too, but it does reward really bad behavior. And I don't like that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your honesty, because you bring a universal truth, is we all have to stay vigilant constantly over our behaviors, our habits, how they're changing our belief systems. Everything that we do is in a constant state of flux as a human. We go through something in life and we might find comfort in food, social media, drinking, whatever these vices are, or things that are desired to avert our attention away from the inner world and the inner experience economy. And it's the challenge of being human, right? How do you stay spiritual in a material world? And I think it's beautiful that a lot of what we are seeing is more creators like yourself who are on social media and who have followings, getting their networks into sacred spaces to have more of those in-depth connections, which I think, helps give social media a purpose. It's like, you need to have an audience, and where do you take that audience? What do you do with that audience? How do you nurture that audience? And how do you use social media as a tool rather than this is my reality? And when it becomes the reality, that's when it messes with us. When it becomes a tool, then it's, wow, look at all of the opportunity I have. But it doesn't make it easy by any means. It makes it difficult for us.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's why it's so great that you're offering this book to the world and the podcast to like help people, I think, come together and hear how other people are managing and finding their way, outside of it. It's really important.
What's your hope for those that are taking this 30-day challenge, for those that need a break from social media and those that need to practice some autosuggestion, some self-hypnosis?
My hope is that they discover a sort of reservoir of supportive resources and imagination that they have within themselves, slowly but surely. And it's a place that they can always go back to, that never leaves them, that's always there for them, and that they can cultivate, an even deeper self intimacy with, for healing, for reflection, for imagination. The autosuggestion, for me, it's really about an intimacy with yourself, like, and like we talked about, like becoming your own influencer and collaborating with yourself.
Thank you so much. You've been an amazing guest. Really appreciate you. For those of you that are listening, share Leave the Feed with a friend, subscribe to the channel. Don't be afraid to disconnect, and stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you again, Shauna.
Thank you so much. Thanks.